Hello, hello. I am so excited to share with you that Laura Kiniry, and tell me if I've got that correct, Laura, when you come up, but she's our speaker today. So Laura has 15 plus years of professional experience as a freelance journalist, specializing in travel, food, and culture. And I can't think of anything more interesting to be or do. So I personally am so jazzed to be able to hear from her today. You may be aware that Laura was the author behind the Smithsonian magazine article featuring Ely as one of the top 15 small towns in America to visit in 2021. But she's also contributed to the Oprah magazine and Condé Nast Traveler. She's been an NPR contributor, National Geographic Traveler contributor. She's written for BBC.com and Atlas Obscura, Popular Mechanics, Savoir. Maybe I said that wrong. I'm sorry. But I'm really excited to hear from Laura about what it's like to be a professional traveler and writer, and some of her insights about Ely or the tourism industry in general. So as always, we're so excited to welcome her. And we will, of course, be making sure that Laura gets her fancy Tuesday group mug. We'll be sending it to her in the mail as she's joining us from California, I believe. So, Laura, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Lacey. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Well, it's morning in California, and I'm really happy to have been asked to do this by Lacey. We connected on Instagram after I wrote the 15 best small towns to visit for Smithsonian. And so this is a little bit new for me. I talk sometimes about certain articles. I don't usually speak to a group about what it's like to be a travel writer. So if you have any particular questions, please pass them along. I'm looking forward to questions from Lacey, and just want to give you just a little bit of background. I have always loved travel, and I've always loved writing, and I know a lot of people are in that very same boat. But I took a long time through college. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do other than travel and write. And with a lot of persistence, I got everything together. I got my career going. I started with a guidebook to New Jersey, which is where I'm originally from. I think that I could sell New Jersey pretty well. It's kind of a hard state to sell. So the fact that I could do it, I'm from South Jersey near Philadelphia. I went to the Miss America pageant when I was a kid. I grew up going to Jersey diners, that kind of thing. But when I got the assignment, when they first approached me, they asked me if I had any professional writing experience. And I said I didn't. And so, of course, I didn't get the book. But I was very determined. And over 3 rejections and 9 months, they finally took me to lunch and said, rewrite the book proposal and we'll give it to you. It's the hardest thing I ever did. But it got me in the door for a AAA travel magazine where I interned. And so I kind of went the back route. I wrote a book first, and then I went to magazines, and then I went as freelancer. My relationship with Smithsonian started kind of in the same way. I reached out, I pitched a story. I'd just gone to Colombia. I guess after a little while, once you're in the travel industry, different PR companies find you, they invite you to different countries, different towns. And so Colombia was one of my first places, and the Smithsonian was doing a festival in DC that was highlighting Colombia. And so the story kind of meshed, worked out. I got a story published online, and then the editor just disappeared, which is kind of what usually happens. But every week I would follow up to the editor. I'd send him more ideas. I'd check in. And finally, after 6 months, he's like, let's get on the phone. Let's get you more stories. That was maybe 10 years ago, and I've been working with them ever since. And then back in 2018, they approached me to see if I would write their best small towns. So for 2018, 2019, and 2021, we skipped it in 2020. I've focused on the best small towns of America, and that's 45 small towns. And I have to say that Ely is one of the towns that stands out to me. I definitely don't remember. I was looking over the list of the 15 from this year, and I don't remember all of the ones that I highlighted so well. But Ely stood out to me because I loved the downtown. I love that there were shops that sold things that you can't find anywhere else. And I honestly didn't know anything about the Boundary Canoe Wilderness before I wrote the story. And then my dad actually said, I was watching the Smithsonian, aerial Smithsonian, and they went over Ely, and it became sort of this big thing. You know, a lot of times I don't get to actually visit the places when I'm doing the small towns. So Ely is one of the places I have not gotten to visit, I have to say. But it's one of the places, like I said, that stood out to me. And the way it works is that so the small towns have to be less than 20,000 people. And there is criteria that's basically whatever year we're highlighting, the place should be someplace that has maybe an anniversary or an attraction. And last year, because of COVID, this outdoor boundary area, like the canoe area, was perfect for people that wanted to get outdoors and explore. It's a collaboration between myself, my editor, and there's a company, it's called Esri. And they're a geographical company that rates small towns based according to, it's ESRI. And it's according to whether they have historical places, what kind of attractions they have, what kind of hometown pride. And then they kind of put these towns together and kind of do a chart that we're able to kind of pull from based on what's going on that particular year. So last year, Ely was one of the places, like I said, because of the outdoors, but also because of the kind of return to this feeling of wanting to get moccasins in your local store, you know, wanting to get clothes that are hand sewn right on site. It's just a really inspiring sort of place. I think Ely, Corning, New York from a few years ago, I wrote about that one. Eureka Springs, Arkansas. These are places that have just stuck in my mind for whatever reason. But that basically is how we chose the town last year. And then Lacey reached out to me.
Yeah, I appreciate your willingness to humor my cold call. I literally just Laura on Instagram and was like, hello. I run a program called Tuesday Groove. So Laura has been very graciously communicating with me since like July or something.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. So we'll obviously now on my life goal list is to get you to come to Ely, but you know, no time sensitivity, just something that's on the table. We have so much to show you.
Yeah, I would love to see it.
What did you study in college?
So I actually went to school for liberal studies, which is as general as you could possibly be. But I think that was because I took 9 years to get through school. I started in Maryland, and then I went to school in New Jersey, and then here in California. And I really just didn't know. I love so many different topics. And I think that's really what's wonderful about being a travel writer. Lacey, as you know, I do a lot of food writing as well. And the funny thing is that a little bit of a secret, but I don't cook as much as you would think if you read my my food stories. But I love cookbooks. I love food. When I was back east, I cooked up a meal for my father, and he's like, "This is so good." I'm like, "You wouldn't think, like, he doesn't think I know how to cook, but I write about it so much. It's all in there." And that was something that kind of came out of being in in isolation. Like, we were all stuck at home. And so I thought, well, I can't travel. What can I do? What kind of writing can I do? And actually, COVID was really good for my writing because I had nothing else to do but write. So it kind of worked out really well.
I was thinking as I looked you up that you seemed like you were being very prolific this year.
You know, it's one of those things, and I think it's a really interesting thing for anybody out there that wants to write. Like, a lot of people will say to you, everybody wants to write. And people would also say to me, everybody wants to write, everybody wants to travel, but it's really hard to make a living. And I used to think it is hard to make a living, but I think part of the reason it's hard to make a living is because I'm not putting everything into it. You know, you're constantly networking, or you're not doing the writing. And during this past year, that's all I had to do. And I thought, oh, wait, this actually works. So if you can do it, you just have to do it. I think that's really the lesson that I learned.
Ely does have a reputation for being a good place for artists of all kinds. And we do have a strong contingency of writers, and we have a good active writers group and everything like that. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear more advice from you as someone who has really paved your own path. You know,
sure. One of the things
to go, everyone wants that.
Yeah.
You said your all. What are some of the surprising things you've had to give to it?
I think one of the things that really stuck out to me, and something that still I still live by, is that a lot of people, even when I was interning at the magazine, so that was a whole different thing. I started with a guidebook. I went to a magazine. The magazine, there was kind of this weird, it's a different kind of writing, but I learned that there are many different kinds of writing, whether you want to do novel writing or creative nonfiction or experimental writing or poetry. And, it's so important to find what you're most comfortable with. And that was something that really kind of sat with me. People would say, do you want to write a novel? And I don't think I do. I would love to write a creative nonfiction. I wrote my first personal essay, which is coming out on Monday, which I'm really excited about. And that's somewhere I want to go, but there's so many different kinds, and there's people that excel at that. And I think for me, I excel at not so much travel writing or food writing, but the creativity that goes behind it. I always said that I was really bad at English, but I was really good at the creativity. So I think that for me, the persistence of thinking, I have a good idea. One example is with Oprah. When I first broke into Oprah magazine, I had an idea and I pitched it a few times, and I am a relentless follower-upper. So I follow up, and always in a very nice way, never like, did you read my pitch? I need you to get back to me, but just kind of keeping my name out there. And the editor got back and she said, I've already told you no on this pitch. And I thought, no, I don't think you did. And it's such a good pitch. I really think it's great for Oprah. But I said, okay, that's fine. And I pitched a different story. And in the time lapse between the first pitch and the no and pitching the second story, a new editor came on board, and she said, oh, do you have any other ideas? I said, yes. And I pitched the original pitch, and she was like, I love this. This is perfect for Oprah. And I just loved like staying behind that idea and just really believing in it. And that broke me into the magazine, and I wrote many things for them over the years. They've gone down to 4 issues a year, so I don't work for them as much. But I always thought that a lot of my friends, a friend of mine wanted to break into Rolling Stone, but he's like, a lot of people want to write for them. And I said, yeah, but there are so many people that are afraid to make that leap. And while they're all standing at the front door in line, you can sneak in the back door and get your pitch in there. And that's always kind of been my motto. I think that it pays off. Even with Smithsonian, it took so many months, but I had other little fires going. So I didn't put everything in one basket.
I love that you say you had other little fires going. I think in Ely, we would say you had many lines in the water.
Oh, I like that.
So how many projects do you think you typically have kind of ongoing at once?
It's funny that you asked that, because when you were doing the announcements, I was looking at my schedule that I was working on. And right now, I think I have about 7 different projects in the works for this month. Again, it's been a wonderful year for me. And I think that I've really been able to just have faith in my writing and just take it day by day. And I think that's really been what's paying off for me. And so I yesterday interviewed somebody about trees in the Pacific Northwest. I do a lot of writing for the Pacific Northwest. And then I talked to an editor about a cruise that I took from Malta to Croatia to Montenegro in the summer that I'm writing another story for. I have a story for KitchenAid on a restaurant up in Northern California. And I have a couple of marketing things. I've started to do a little bit of marketing, but it's travel marketing. So it's trips for viewing snow leopards, or the one that I'm doing now is on New Zealand. So my mind is in constantly so many different places. And I do think that's why Smithsonian came to me with the small towns originally, is that I think that I am good at being in many different places at once. That might be just a little bit of a, I don't know, a specialty I have or something, but it's really nice for me because I love learning about places. And I think that comes through in the writing.
Yeah, I think so too.
Thank you.
It occurs to me, so you said that it's been, kind of a blessing in disguise maybe to have to stay at home more and focus on the writing. But I'm curious, as you've had to step back from travel in a traditional sense, what stands out that you miss the most? When you think about the future and getting back into a rhythm of being abroad more, what are you eager for?
So during the time that we had to step back, I sort of did my own traveling here in San Francisco. I walked every inch of Golden Gate Park. I'd walked to the ocean, and I kind of rediscovered my city. But the moment I got back in July, my first trip after going to see my family in New Jersey was to Ghana. So I went big. I went straight to Africa, and I was terrified on the plane. I thought, I am out of the rhythm of flying. I'm out of the rhythm of going to these different places. And then I got to Ghana, and a lot of times you're traveling with other writers. This particular time I was with a representative of United Airlines. It was for a new flight for United, but she was only there for a few days. And then I was by myself with just local reps in Ghana who are very different time-wise than I think we are in the States. I'll pick you up at 8 means I'll pick you up at 9:15 maybe. And that also means when we put you on a plane to go up to Tamale in northern Ghana, when you come back down, we might not be there for you. And I kind of found it really fun. Like, I think I missed that. I missed sort of like figuring it all out. And the generosity of people, I think, was most something that I really missed. The way that people say, oh, well, you're in town, why don't we have dinner? Have you ever tried this particular food? Have you ever done ice fishing, say, per se, or dog sledding? Here, come, I want to show you what our place is all about. And I think when they have somebody who's so willing to learn that, it just meshes so well. And I think that's really what I missed. I mean, every place that I go, I want to try the local cuisine. I want to try whatever the local dish is. I want to do all of the local things. I want to wear the moccasins and wear the clothes. And in fact, I actually thought of coming up to Ely just to do some shopping, like honestly, after I wrote that.
I think you should come to Ely to do some shopping. I actually love, for the group who are here, and Hannah, if you'd be willing to share what the in-person group has to say. I'm curious, Zoomers, in-person people, like, what do we think if Laura were in town? If you ran into her, like, what would you say? Like, come to my house, I want to make you blank. Or, oh my gosh, have you been to Kawashui Falls yet? I would love to capture some of your thoughts, and for my own reasons, I'd love to know, and we can share with Cindy at the Ely Tourism Bureau. Laura, so last week our Tuesday group speaker was the executive director of the Ely Tourism Bureau. Mm-hmm. And it sounded like there was the possibility that Ely got on the radar, maybe of Esri or of you or Smithsonian, because of some drama we had about our water tower. Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, then I won't go there, but
okay.
Let me see what the chat group said. Someone said, Laura, have you had tater tot hot dish?
No, but I have not had that, but I was just traveling in Wyoming with a writer from Minnesota who told me about it for the first time.
Hot dish is important up here. In Ely, we have a tradition of Cornish pasties because we have a history of mining in the area. Immigrants from Cornwall, England brought their pasties to the community. We have a strong base of Slovenian people who, have you ever heard of Patica?
No.
Petitza is a enriched dough that is rolled out extremely thinly, like 4 feet by, I don't know, 40 inches by 60 inches. What is that? You put a honey walnut butter cream paste on it and roll it up into an extremely tight spiral. And it's
Okay.
at Christmas and Easter time.
Oh,
We of course
sounds so
have
good.
Finnish foods. Yeah, and I could go on forever. These are just me speaking now. Sorry, chat people.
No, it's interesting though, because I knew about the pasties because I had done a story on portable foods after the Smithsonian piece, and I did the connection. And again, that's what I love writing about a place because it always stays in your mind.
Someone on the chat said lutefisk.
I know of it. I've never had it.
I've not
That
had
is
it.
a Swedish.
It's a Swedish thing. Yeah, it's a cod soaked in lye with a white gravy. And we'll see if the contributor of that comment wants to elaborate and has a beloved lutefisk tradition. But lots of giggles in the room from that one. I meant you mentioned before going to Ghana, you had said you had to kind of spend some time rediscovering your city. I personally love living in Ely because I think it's very moving. I think to some extent travel is a state of mind, and it's fun to live in a tourist town because you're kind of, my perspective is that people who are traveling are looking to have a good attitude about their experience. They want to learn. They want to celebrate what's around them and learn about what's around them. And when I haven't been able to travel yet, I've yearned to and tried to adopt that mentality. Like there's so much here. What's something new you discovered about San Francisco?
I really rediscovered the street art. I think that was a big thing that happened. So I made different books. We had this honey bear street art thing that was happening here in the city where people would put, there was a street artist named Finch, he would put the honey bears on buildings, and then he started selling them so people could put them in the windows and kids could look for the honey bears. But for me it was really exciting because my father is 80, he's back in New Jersey, he's my brothers are nearby but he lives by himself, and so I would take pictures of the honey bears and send them to my dad, and so we've kind of experienced the city together. Golden Gate Park, I mean, I had loved the park. It's right down the street from my house, but I hadn't really been in it in forever. And so a good friend of mine and I started walking to Ocean Beach, which round trip from my apartment is about 10 miles. And we would do it every weekend, and we would we'd see the bison and see what the bisons had babies during the pandemic. And we would watch the bison because there's a little bison patty. We'd go around the Japanese tea garden. They put a Ferris wheel in the park, which became my favorite thing to see because it would light up every night. And people started associating me with the Ferris wheel. Even my roommate at the time bought me a Ferris wheel sweatshirt for Christmas. I felt like I walked so much more than I had in the past. And it also, not only did it help me with my city, but writing the small towns and just the way the pandemic plays out. I am supposed to go on a big trip next month, but with everything that's happening, it's really hard to tell if that's going to be in the works. It's to Antarctica. But if it doesn't work out, I have been really enjoying traveling through the States again. Lacey, I think I told you I did a train trip up to Portland and Spokane and Whitefish. And I took the train over to Colorado earlier in the year, and I do it Amtrak, I do coach seats. And, I think it's just very adaptable. I think that's one thing this career has taught me. So it's been really wonderful rediscovering. My father, for some reason, was upset about the train trip. I said, Dad, I get closer to you. The closer I go toward New Jersey in the country, we're closer. So this will be perfect. It's sort of like exploring the backyard of the country.
How beautiful. We have a question here. What makes the typical small town stand out? Top 3 things that you almost always see. And then specifically, do you notice that recreational amenities tend to be one of those things?
Yes, if recreational amenities are part of the town, it makes a huge difference. I mean, I do think the canoe boundary wilderness was a huge, huge thing, to being just with Ely being right on the side of that. But I actually wrote down some of the stuff. So the vibrant downtown centers is a huge thing. I mean, just small towns have had such gorgeous centers. Some of them are coming back. Some Ely specifically having things that are made right downtown on Sheridan Street, huge. One of a kind museums and attractions. I think the Boundary Wilderness area there, that is one of a kind, something I had never heard of. Of course, in my travels now, I ask people, have you heard of that? In fact, the friend that I met from Minnesota in Wyoming, it was the first thing I asked him. And plenty of hometown pride. Hometown pride is huge. And I think that in all of the small towns that we highlight, we definitely see that. And that's something that is exciting. I mean, the reason that Corning stood out for me is because they have this great glass blowing history. And I think that history of a town, a place that kind of keeps its traditions alive like Ely does, that makes a place stand above any other place. And also the specifics. I mean, when I'm looking for a small town to highlight, I really want those specifics. I want to know, why is this so different? Like, why Canadian fur traders? I like that whole history. I didn't know anything about that. And I think a lot of readers don't either. I think that's something that being in a place like Ely, maybe sometimes you forget. Like in San Francisco, I just assume everybody knows Golden Gate Park and everybody knows that there's bison there. And then when people tell me they don't know that, I'm surprised. So it's really kind of like looking at your place from a different viewpoint.
I didn't know about the bison, I'll tell you that. That's for sure. Yeah, we have a lot that we could celebrate very specifically. We have someone mentioned in the, when I had asked, what do you think Laura should do when she comes to Ely? We have an International Wolf Center. We have the North American Bear Center. We have a museum that celebrates and I'm sorry, folks, if I get this wrong, but I believe the person who was grandfathered into living in the Boundary Water Canoe Area Wilderness, she was the last resident, and she got along by making homemade root beer. So her cabin was transported out of the Boundary Water Canoe Area Wilderness and into a place that's kind of on the outskirts of town. And you can learn all about the root beer lady, Dorothy Moulter, and sample root beer of her recipe. Yeah, we have a lot of history here to celebrate, that's for sure.
That's a story in itself right there.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you notice are barriers people have to traveling? Just the other day, I was speaking with a colleague about, we don't have a shuttle that goes from the Twin Cities to Ely. That would be a really complicated thing to coordinate, and it would be expensive. But in your travel experience, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what kind of barriers are likely to get in the way, or where do you think is a good place to invest energy in terms of getting people to your tourist destination?
I definitely do think transportation is a huge thing. I am living in San Francisco for the last 27 years. I haven't really driven anywhere. And when I went to Whitefish on the train in Montana, I went there because years ago I worked a summer in Glacier National Park. And I thought, but I can't get to Glacier. How am I going to get there? I don't drive. But what I ended up doing was I think it's called Turo, where you rent a car from just a local resident. And I walked over to his house. I took his car. I went up to Glacier. I came back, and it was amazing. I think that if more things, like if that's available in more places, because I couldn't, the mountains were calling me. Once I got to Whitefish, I had to go to Glacier. And having more accessibility to transportation would make a huge difference. One of the things with Ely, when I was thinking of coming to visit, I was like, is it on the train route? That was something that I was sort of looking for too. Obviously an airport but yeah, investing in just ways to maybe trips up from the Twin Cities or down from Canada, or I mean, that's really kind of, for me, what's always stood in my way a little bit. I think that's why the pandemic has actually been really good as well, like getting back to train travel, getting back to figuring out ways other than flying to get to certain places.
Mm-hmm. And forgive me if this isn't a train you want the conversation to go down, but I'm curious, just with your experience in the tourism industry, you talk about pivoting to trains over planes. Do you hope for changes in the tourism industry in the future, or what do you project about the industry in general? And again, I recognize you're a writer and a traveler, so you might not have a perspective on that, but if you do, I'd like to hear it.
I mean, for me, one of the things that I really thought of during the pandemic is that when I go to places from now on, I don't want to just, and that was the thing with Ghana. It was my first trip, and it was originally a very short trip. And I thought, I can't fly all the way to Africa for just 4 days. I mean, I can't do that. Just everything with the train travel and the carbon footprint or the plane travel. And I really feel like I would love to see the industry go into more immersive experiences. I always say that one of my favorite travel experiences originated with a story that I did for BBC, and it was in southern Italy. And I'm a New Jersey Italian, so I have to say I didn't want to go to Italy. I have this vision of Italians from my New Jerseyness. It was totally different than anything I had ever expected. And I met this family there, and they were just a wonderful family. They were the focus of the original story, but they invited me back to harvest olives. And I went back in harvest season, which was November, not even for a story. And I spent 3 weeks living with the family, harvesting 700 olive trees with volunteers from all over the world. And then I went back, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And then I went back the next year. And I was part of the community. I was part of the family. I felt like I was making a difference. I was helping out there. And I think that if the travel industry can go into more immersive experiences like that, where you're spending a lot of time, you're investing in the local community, it not only does it make a difference to the community, but it makes a difference to the person. It's life-changing. Oh, you're on silent.
That sounds amazing. And I agree, how moving to really feel like you went somewhere and you were a part of it.
Yeah. I have to say, actually, the last time I harvested with them was in 2014. I just wrote a story that came out on Friday about them because it's still they're my friends and they're my family now. And I love olive oil, just learning about the process from any sort of thing. And Ely seems to have a ton of things like that, where you can really teach somebody from start to finish, and then it becomes part of them.
I'm loving that aspect of living in Ely, where everywhere I go, I'm learning by osmosis, because I didn't enter the community as someone who was a very strong outdoors person, or, there's so many, because of the Boundary Water Canoe Area Wilderness, many residents who especially are transplants are drawn to the area because they have a passion for the boreal flora and fauna. And I don't come to this community with that knowledge, but I love living here because I'm learning so much just because of the people I'm surrounded by, and they're so knowledgeable. So I will stop with the Ely plugs eventually, but I have still so many more left in me. We did have a question in the chat about, let me see, I don't want to get it wrong. So let me just, and then I know Hannah's got some questions from our in-person cohort here, but, kind of pivoting topics, but we have an amazing place-based community that attracts people for retirement. People in the new remote work economy are able to kind of move here and work remotely, as well as vacation, of course. So are you aware of any strategies that other amenities-based tourism communities have used to even leverage for better economic growth? Just curious if you have any insight with your small town work, what's been beneficial to them in terms of growing the economy above and beyond tourism?
I don't know too well. I was just, when I was in Wyoming, I was in Sheridan, and I know that they were having like it was a similar talks that they were doing. I know for them, they are trying very hard to get the Amtrak line to come back through Wyoming, which would bring people and perhaps railway jobs and things like that. But it's not something that I'm well versed on.
Mm-hmm. It's something that my work in town is involved in, right? We want to have a strong economy and we rely on our tourism industry, but we want to grow our economy above and beyond tourism. So thanks for letting me pick your brain about that one. Let's have Hannah chat in some of the questions from the in-person group. We've got a couple minutes left here. 15 minutes, actually, if you're willing to be so kind,
Sure.
Laura. That might take a moment. We're here at the Grand Ely Lodge in Ely, one place of many that is known for its very delicious and creamy chicken wild rice soup.
Oh, that sounds yummy.
Yes, and wild rice is very special to our place here. The Anishinaabe people who have been here for many hundreds of years were wild rice and are wild rice harvesters. And so wild rice is a sacred food that we all get to benefit from consuming. It's very cool to learn about the wild rice harvest and things like that. So just infinite amounts of things to learn.
Yeah. I definitely think that's one of the things I've learned, especially through the Smithsonian small towns, is how much this country really has to offer and how unique each place really is. I think we get lost in that a lot of times with big box stores and highways and interstates and everything, but the small towns really helps me as a writer and as a human refocus and kind of see the uniqueness of each different place.
I can hear them asking questions.
I remember when I first reached out to the Tourism Bureau at Ely, I think I called and I pronounced it Eli. And I was quickly corrected, but I do have to say my my South Jersey pronunciations come out. I'm frequently pretty wrong in my pronunciation. So I was very glad that they let me know.
Yes, Ely, but you're not alone. Even Minnesotans and regional residents don't always know.
Yeah.
We'll try to turn up our Minnesotan accents for you. Okay, so one question was, what's your knowledge of the music scene in some of the small towns you've covered? And if that's a big aspect of their culture?
It really depends on the towns. One of the places that we did was Alabama Shoals, and that was where Aretha Franklin got her start. And part of the reason that we highlighted that is because the biopic on Aretha Franklin was coming out last year. And so that was a very good connection. I went to Tupelo, Mississippi for work. I love when I do get invited to the towns, it's one of my favorite things ever to do. Because they're places, again, that I wouldn't know of. They have these histories that are so unfamiliar to me. I didn't realize that Elvis Presley was born in Tupelo, and we got to go to his house. But then I learned all about this Elvis, wasn't Elvis impersonator. There's a difference between impersonator and I can't even remember the other thing right now, but they had a boot camp to train these Elvis performers. And to me, it was the most fascinating thing ever, just to kind of see the history, to see the guitar, the hardware store where Elvis got his first guitar, where his mother got that for him. And they really highlight the history. I just was invited to West Texas to kind of explore Buddy Holly's history. So these are all, older artists, but when you're there, you get to kind of see how the music has changed from back then to now, whether somebody's inspired by, say, Buddy Holly, or they've kind of created their own route in the music scene. So I think I'm going to do the West Texas because I just find that stuff super fascinating. I actually moved to Austin, Texas once years ago to be a rock star. So I love the music scenes of different places. The rock star didn't happen, but the writing did. So that's good.
So are you the lyricist and the singer, or do you have an instrument that you play?
I have a guitar that I've taken all over the country that I'm still not very good at, but people all over the country have played it in railway stations and in Glacier National Park. And yeah, I still have it.
So it sounds like the communities where music is prevalent, they've done a good job of infusing the music into the narrative that they tell.
Yeah, and actually, I love the way that you put that. I think that's a really good thing. I mean, really, as a community, to find what you have and really kind of hone in on that and make it into something that people want to see. A lot of people go to Memphis to see Elvis things, but there's a triangle of music there. I think it's Nashville, Memphis, and Tupelo. Tupelo you wouldn't think of, but it's got just so much history.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions from the audience was about train travel. I think we have a romantic notion of looking out the window, and I'm curious if that notion rings true, or if it's really just what is the experience from point A to point B, and what's good about it, and what do you caution us about?
Well, first off, when about 10 years ago, I said I would never do train travel again in coach, because I've always done it in coach. But part of the reason I went back to it this year is because when I got on the train to go to Colorado in March, I didn't want to fly. And Amtrak was exactly the same as it was 20 years ago. And in a world where things are constantly changing, it felt very comfortable to me. But exactly the same in so many ways. There was a 4-hour delay when I was in Oregon, and there's still not Wi-Fi on the long distance trains. The food is still really bad, so you want to pack your pasties and have them with you. But the scenery is phenomenal, and the experience of being on a train, to me, I think it's just, you really get to see the country in a way. I mean, the whole reason I even started on the train is because I had moved from New Jersey to San Francisco and then to Austin. And I'd never been, like, I was going to these little pockets, but how did they all connect? And how does this country connect? And I think a friend of mine said, the Amtrak is so slow. How do you do this? And I'm like, you just go into it knowing it's going to be slow, knowing it might be delayed. Knowing that, in fact, a train derailed when I was going into Whitefish. I was on my way to Wisconsin, but I ended up having to fly out of Kalispell to Los Angeles. But again, with my travel, flexibility has made my life so much easier, because even when I was flying back from New Jersey last week and I was in Houston, I said to my dad, he's like, well, what if your connection gets canceled? I said, then I stay in Houston and I explore Houston. So I think seeing the world with an explorer's eyes makes a big difference and makes life a little easier.
Awesome. Well, Laura, I'm just oh wait, we have another comment here. Oh, yes. Just another note about the Ely area opportunity is that we have a really extensive network of bike trails being developed, and we recently had the addition of some mountain biking trails added to a local cross-country ski network of trails we have here. So no shortage of amenities that we will be telling you all about when we figure out how to put together an invite for you to come to Ely and do a writing project on all that we have to offer.
That would be wonderful. Honestly, if I can get myself there, I would love to come and visit it. It definitely is on my list of, out of those 45 towns, one of my top 5 favorites. So,
well, I'm so honored that you would take the time to chat with us today. I really look forward to mailing you our wheel thrown handmade Tuesday group mug, and we'll certainly be in touch. But I think we've learned a lot from your insight today, And that's what we're all about. Tuesday group, just for the folks who are on Zoom who maybe have never experienced Tuesday group before, we meet weekly in the Grand Daily Lodge here. We offer our program when possible as a hybrid model. So online as well as in person when we can. And we just get together, we have lunch, we see and be seen in community with one another, and we learn something. So Laura, thank you so much for letting us learn from you today.
Lacey, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending. And I did just see that question. I have not attended any folk schools, but would love to.
Okay, cool.